us to play music in the house, even though he didn't forbid it in that manner. But I knew that if I were to do it, I would face the anger of my father. So I have to admit, he's not here in the audience, so I can praise him as much as he wants, and I can talk about my own sins. When I would want to listen to music back in the day, right, I'd have to turn the radio on really low and be very close to it, because I knew that if my father heard, he wouldn't like it. And I felt so guilty doing that. Nonetheless, that type of tarbiyah, where you're firm and yet loving. And similarly, he put me on the path to memorize the Quran. I was 13, 14 years old. He goes, no, you must memorize the Quran. I'm going to get somebody, you give the conditions, whatever you want to do. If you don't want to go to a madrasa, that's fine. I'll get the imams up for you here. You want to do it at this time or that time, you don't want to take a break from school. He was very accommodating, but he was still firm. You must memorize the Quran. Do you think I was happy at that stage? Wallahi, I'll tell you, I was crying and begging. I don't want to memorize the Quran. Why are you forcing this on me? I want to go out and play. All my friends are playing with their bikes and whatnot. Why should I be stuck at home? But he was firm. He was never strict. He was firm and he wouldn't budge. He goes, you put the conditions, but you are going to memorize the Quran. To this day, I stand in infinite debt to my father. One of the greatest blessings that he did was that he requested and he guided me to memorize the Quran by the blessings of Allah. My point being, realize that your love for your child has to transcend secular world. It has to be religious. And that is the ultimate blessing you can give. You know what? I have never seen a case where a father raised the family in an Islamic environment with gentleness. This is the key. Because if you're too strict, then the son can backlash. Yes. I have never seen the case where the father has raised a family with Islamic values, except that eventually the child grows up and comes back to Islam. What do I mean by eventually? I mean that yes, I have seen a lot of my friends, a lot of my peers, when they go out of the family house, they finally get 20, 22, they can leave, they go down a path that is not good for a few years. But what happens then? Reality kicks in and they remember their own upbringing. And they remember how their own mother and father were. And so when they get married and when they have children, they don't have any other model to emulate. They don't have any other system to bring forth other than the model of their mother and father. So even if they go astray for a period of time, because their parents were good, because their parents were meticulous, because their parents were good Muslims, eventually they too were forced to become good Muslims. I conclude by giving you a simple reality. It is so profound and yet so simple. If you're going to talk the talk, but not walk the walk, if you're going to tell them to be good, but you're not going to be good yourselves, then wallahi, you are nothing less than hypocrites. And your children will see through that immediately. And as soon as they leave the nest, they have nothing to keep them in place. But if you're going to talk the talk and walk the walk, if you're going to live up to the ideals of Islam, if you're going to be a good Muslim in your relationship with yourself, with Allah, with your wife, with your spouse, if you give them the model of good Islam, then even if they go astray temporarily, even if they go astray for a period of time, in the long run, it is simply impossible that they don't come back to this. Why? Because you have left them the best example. And deep down, they know that. I have many parents come to me, they're crying, what can we do? Our son's doing that, our daughter's doing that. You know what? You've heard this all before and it is a reality. Don't come crying to me when your kid is 18, when you haven't done anything for the last 18 years. I'm not a miracle worker. I can't save your child by the snap of my fingers. You didn't take care of him for 18 years. And now you come crying to me, how can I get my son to be interested in Islam? Why weren't you interested in Islam? Why didn't you open up the Quran? Why didn't you fast and pray? What do you expect your child to do when you didn't do it for him? Brothers and sisters, wallahi, there's no magic about this. There's no solution that is simple and easy. It's simple. You be a good Muslim, you be a role model for your son and daughter, then that's all they need. And they will grow up looking at that role model, appreciating that role model, and then when the time comes, imitating that role model for their own kids. The way to perfect Islam, the way to make sure Islam lives on from generation to generation is to practice it yourselves so that your children grow up seeing the reality of Islam and then they grow up practicing it themselves to pass it down to their children. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala cause us to live as Muslims. May He cause us to die as Muslims. And may He cause us to be resurrected as Muslims. وَجَزَاكُمُ اللَّهُ خَيْرًا وَالسَّلَامُ عَلَيْكُمْ وَرَحْمَةُ اللَّهِ وَبَرَكَاتُهُ.